Behind every great fortune lies a scandal, but Arabella Huntington's story contains enough controversial relationships to fuel an entire season of period drama television. This was a woman who understood that in Gilded Age America, strategic patience could transform any disadvantage into ultimate victory over the very people who tried to exclude you. Her ability to navigate complex romantic arrangements while building independent wealth demonstrates a level of long-term thinking that puts modern business strategists to shame. She proved that being permanently blacklisted from society's most exclusive circles meant nothing if you possessed the vision to create your own institutions that would educate and inspire future generations. Her transformation from social pariah to cultural icon represents one of history's most spectacular examples of turning prejudice into motivation for greatness. On today's episode of Old Money Allure, we investigate how Arabella Huntington used scandal as fuel to build a legacy that made her enemies irrelevant and her name immortal. Meet Arabella Duval Yarrington, a woman so determined to escape poverty that she would lie about everything from her birthday to her birthplace while executing one of history's most successful long-term relationship strategies. Born around 1850 in Richmond, Virginia, Arabella grew up in the kind of desperate circumstances that make people either give up entirely or become absolutely ruthless in their pursuit of something better. Her father died when she was 9, leaving her mother Catherine to operate a boarding house in Richmond's roughest neighbourhood, a district filled with hotels, brothels, gambling dens and slave auction houses, where respectability was a luxury the Yarrington family couldn't afford. But this harsh environment would prove to be Arabella's greatest asset, because it was here that she would encounter her destiny in the form of Collis P. Huntington, a railroad magnate 32 years her senior. Arabella was nothing if not a strategic thinker, and by 19 she had devised a plan so audacious it would have impressed the most calculating fortune hunters of her generation. In 1869, she entered into what appeared to be a marriage with John Archer Worsham, a gambling parlor operator who offered her the perfect cover for what she was really planning. The marriage was actually an elaborate deception designed to give Arabella respectability while allowing her to maintain her relationship with Collis Huntington, because Worsham was already married to another woman named Annette back in Richmond. This arrangement allowed Arabella to establish herself in New York society as the respectable Mrs. Worsham, while conducting what was essentially a 14-year audition for the role of Collis Huntington's wife. In 1870, Arabella gave birth to a son named Archer Milton Worsham, whose paternity would become one of the Gilded Age's most carefully guarded secrets. Most historians now believe that Collis Huntington was the biological father, making this child both a love child and a future heir to one of America's greatest fortunes. Conveniently, John Worsham died shortly after Archer's birth, though in reality he simply returned to Richmond and his legal wife, leaving Arabella free to claim widowhood and continue her relationship with Huntington. Arabella spent the next 14 years living as Collis Huntington's mistress, while he remained married to his first wife, Elizabeth, demonstrating a level of patience and strategic thinking that would have impressed military generals. During this period, she wasn't just sitting around waiting. She was actively building her own fortune through shrewd real estate investments that put her in direct competition with titans like William H. Vanderbilt and John D. Rockefeller. In 1877, she purchased property in New York that she later sold to John D. Rockefeller himself, proving that she could play the robber baron game just as effectively as the men who had invented it. She also began developing her passion for art collecting, filling her West 54th Street house with progressive French landscapes and aesthetic movement furnishings that would establish her reputation as a woman of sophisticated taste. But Arabella's most valuable investment was in her relationship with Collis Huntington, and she was about to discover that 14 years of perfect mistresshood would pay dividends beyond her wildest dreams. For 14 years, Arabella lived as Collis Huntington's mistress in what was essentially the world's longest and most expensive job interview for the position of railroad tycoon's wife. The arrangement was an open secret in New York society, yet Arabella found herself consistently excluded from elite circles dominated by families like the Astors and Vanderbilts, who considered her scandalous past utterly unforgivable. Society gatekeeper Ward McAllister was approached with a $9,000 bribe from Collis to provide introductions for Arabella, but when Collis balked at paying the full amount, McAllister leaked damaging gossip that ensured their permanent exile from New York's grandest ballrooms. Despite this social ostracism, Arabella used her time productively, demonstrating remarkable business acumen, while Collis showered her with extravagant gifts, including a rope of 119 blue diamonds from Tiffany's. When Elizabeth Huntington finally died in 1884, Collis wasted no time in making their relationship legal, marrying Arabella in his San Francisco home, with the ceremony performed by the famous Reverend Henry Ward Beecher. Beecher received 4 $1,000 bills as his fee for the ceremony, which was either extremely generous or the going rate for legitimizing 14 years of adultery in Gilded Age America. Collis formally adopted 14-year-old Archer at the time of the marriage, a move that was widely interpreted as his tacit admission of paternity and his desire to secure the boy's inheritance rights. Even marriage couldn't overcome the stigma of Arabella's past, and despite their immense wealth and Fifth Avenue address, the couple remained permanently excluded from the inner circles of New York high society. But Arabella was building something far more valuable than social acceptance. She was positioning herself to inherit one of America's greatest fortunes, while simultaneously developing the expertise that would make her one of the most influential art collectors of her generation. She spent lavishly during her marriage to Collis, including $300,000 on pearls in 1906, more than anyone else in the Western world had ever spent on jewellery at one time. Her personal expenses were equally extravagant, with over $4,000 spent on lingerie from a single Paris shop in 1912, because apparently even underwear needed to reflect her extraordinary lifestyle. When scandal sheet publisher William D'Alton Mann tried to print details of her past in 1905, Arabella paid him $15,000 to stay silent, then fled to Europe minutes ahead of a subpoena when Mann was sued for libel. When Collis P. Huntington died on August 13, 1900, at his Adirondack camp, Arabella's 14-year investment in being the perfect mistress and 20-year investment in being the perfect wife finally paid off spectacularly. She inherited more than $50 million, equivalent to approximately $1.9 billion in today's currency, making her not just one of the wealthiest women in America, but a legitimate billionaire by modern standards. The inheritance represented 2/3 of Huntington's vast railroad and industrial fortune, with the remaining third going to his nephew, Henry E. Huntington, setting up the next chapter of Arabella's extraordinary life. Nonetheless, Arabella wasn't content to simply enjoy her newfound wealth in quiet widowhood. She was about to shock even scandal-hardened Gilded Age society by marrying the one man guaranteed to cause maximum family drama. The most outrageous romance of Arabella's scandalous life began when she set her sights on the one man who could help her consolidate the entire Huntington fortune, her late husband's own nephew. With her inheritance making her worth approximately $1.9 billion in today's currency, Arabella had achieved the kind of wealth that could buy anything except the one thing she'd always been denied: complete social acceptance. But rather than spending her golden years quietly enjoying her fortune, the 60-something billionaire was about to embark on the most controversial relationship of her already scandalous life. Henry E. Huntington, Collis's nephew and business heir who had inherited the remaining third of the Huntington fortune, had admired Arabella for years and saw her widowhood as his opportunity to strike. After Collis's death, Henry separated from his wife and moved to the Metropolitan Club, just 3 blocks from Arabella's Fifth Avenue mansion, positioning himself for what would become one of the most strategic courtships in Gilded Age history. Henry's approach to winning Arabella was unique for the era. He pursued her through art purchases that demonstrated both his wealth and his understanding of her sophisticated tastes. His first major acquisition was a statement to this strategy. he spent $577,000 on French curtains, called the Noble Pastoral, at Arabella's urging, even before they were married. This amount exceeded the entire construction cost of his future San Marino mansion, proving that love, or at least the pursuit of consolidating two massive fortunes, makes people do financially irrational things. After a 7-year courtship that involved countless art purchases and strategic romantic gestures, Arabella finally accepted Henry's proposal in 1913. On July 16, 1913, the 63-year-old Arabella married the 63-year-old Henry at the American Church in Paris, creating one of the most scandalous unions in American high society history. The marriage shocked their social circles because it united the remaining Huntington fortune under one roof and represented the ultimate insider transaction between two people who already knew exactly what they were getting. More importantly for gossip-hungry society, it meant that Arabella had married her late husband's nephew, creating the kind of family drama that would have made modern tabloid editors weep with joy. Their prenuptial agreement, signed just 4 days before the wedding, protected both of their interests while allowing them to combine their collecting activities and create what would become one of America's greatest art collections. The marriage was both a business merger and a genuine love match, as evidenced by Henry's declaration in his 60s that, "I am just beginning to live, and life seems so very, very sweet." Together, they assembled one of the finest collections of 18th-century British art outside the United Kingdom, including gems like Gainsborough's The Blue Boy and Lawrence's Pinky. The couple spent $21 million between 1908 and 1917 on art, including works by Rembrandt, Velázquez, and other old masters that would become the foundation of their cultural legacy. But beyond their art collecting, the marriage represented something even more significant: Arabella's final triumph over the social prejudices that had excluded her for decades. By marrying Henry, she not only consolidated two fortunes, she had positioned herself to create something that would make every society family who had ever snubbed her completely irrelevant to history. What Arabella accomplished through her marriage to Henry would prove that the woman once excluded from every important ballroom in New York was about to build something more enduring than all their reputations combined. The marriage between Arabella and Henry Huntington became the foundation for creating a cultural legacy that would make their names immortal long after the society families who had scorned them were forgotten. Arabella spent her final years dividing time between New York, Paris, and California. Though she preferred the cultural sophistication of Paris and New York to the West Coast estate that Henry was developing, she limited her stays at the San Marino ranch to just 2 months per year, forcing the devoted Henry to follow her across the country and across the Atlantic to maintain their relationship. Her art collecting reached extraordinary heights during this period, including a $2.5 million acquisition from the Rodolphe Kahn collection through dealer Joseph Duveen that represented one of the largest private art purchases in American history. Beyond art, Arabella proved herself to be a forward-thinking philanthropist who supported causes that reflected her personal values and experiences as a woman who had fought her way up from poverty. She supported the women's suffrage movement by providing financial backing rather than marching herself, understanding that her money could be more effective than her personal participation in protests. She donated generously to institutions including Harvard Medical School, Hampton Institute, the American Geographical Society, and the Hispanic Society of America, which was founded by her son, Archer. Her spending habits remained spectacularly extravagant throughout her final years, including $3,112 on skincare in 1921 and $6,349 on wardrobe alterations in 1923. These amounts, equivalent to $57,000 and $116,000 respectively in today's currency, proved that even in her 70s, Arabella understood that maintaining her appearance was essential to maintaining her influence. Henry's vision for their collections was always public-minded, and even before Arabella's death, he had begun planning to transform their San Marino estate into a public institution that would educate and inspire future generations. When Arabella died on September 16th, 1924, in New York City at age 72 to 74, she left behind more than just a massive fortune and incredible art collection. She had proven that a woman born into poverty in a Richmond boarding house could not only achieve extraordinary wealth, but could also create institutions that would educate and inspire people for generations. Henry died 3 years later in 1927, and both are buried in a circular white marble temple called the Temple of the Four Seasons, designed by John Russell Pope as a precursor to the Jefferson Memorial. The Huntington Library Art Collections and Botanical Gardens stands today as Arabella's most enduring legacy, housing nearly 9 million manuscripts and books, world-class art collections, and 120 acres of botanical gardens. The institution welcomes over 750,000 visitors annually and supports more than 1,700 researchers, proving that Arabella's vision extended far beyond her own lifetime. Her transformation from a southern boarding house operator's daughter to one of America's most influential cultural philanthropists represents the ultimate Gilded Age success story and the final victory over every society family that had ever dared to exclude her. Through her strategic relationships, shrewd investments, and cultural vision, Arabella Huntington created a legacy that continues to educate and inspire more than a century after her death, proving that the best revenge against social prejudice is building something so magnificent that history remembers you while forgetting your enemies entirely. And now we'd love to see you in the comments. What is your opinion on the marriages of Arabella Huntington? Was she a shrewd operator, utilising romance as a way to better her life? Or was she a heartless, calculating social climber? We look forward to hearing your thoughts below. And with that said, thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Allure.